All right, welcome back to another episode of the High Performance Podcast. Just a solo episode today, so didn't have a guest booked in for this week, but I just thought it'd be good to sort of do a bit of a wrap up episode, or I don't know. I like the idea of doing more solo podcasts as well. I mean, there's no reason why we can't be knocking out 2 or 3 episodes a week, and that definitely is part of our plans, regardless of if I start doing solo episodes or not. But yeah, I think I can definitely sit down at least once a month and knock out a solo episode. So maybe we'll try to make that the commitment. I used to really, and I definitely like the idea of doing solo podcasts, but just when you haven't done them for a while and when you're not doing them on a regular basis, it can feel really intimidating just to stare down the barrel and just to talk to yourself for like an hour or so, or who knows how long this will go for. But yeah, like I said, I used to really enjoy the idea of it, and I like the idea of being able to do it. I personally find it therapeutic, and hopefully some people want to listen to it. So I thought I'd just sort of wrap up my 2024, talk about what my plans or my goals are for 2025, talk about, reflect on how I did with some of my goals in 2024, because there was a really mixed bag there, and I was pretty critical of myself I did objectively miss one of my goals, but just not pursuing some of my goals super hard. But then at the end of the day, I forget that I'm someone who does set a lot of goals, and some of them aren't always that realistic. So I need to remind myself of that as well. And just because I missed out on a couple of goals, again, when I reflect on the year that was, just when I was just doing a little bit of note taking, just so I'd have something to refer to throughout this podcast, I was like, oh, fuck, like it's crazy how you can just get fixated on a couple of goals that aren't necessarily going how you want them to. But something I do a good job of is just still showing up every day and just swinging the axe at whatever I'm sort of moving towards. And we did make a lot of progress in 2024. So yeah, just because it was a challenging year, like when I sit back and reflect, even just objectively, just a lot of the numbers that sort of underpin the business, we just had a really, really good year. So starting 2025, I think personally on a much better foot. I'm really, really excited about what I can get up to in 2025. So actually, just before I get into the 2024 wrap up or annual review, I noticed whenever we talk about, just on the boys episodes, whenever there's a bit of a musical discussion and we talk about whatever music we've been listening to or whatever's inspired us lately, we get a lot of feedback on those conversations and people seem to really enjoy it. So I thought I would also just sort of go over the most impactful, how am I even describing this? I had a few like transcendent moments with music this year, and like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of you will probably relate to this. Just over the course of my life, music has become, especially through streaming services, just making music more perpetually accessible. Music has just become such a background thing in my life. Like I always have my headphones in, either listening to a podcast or, like I said, just having some music on in the background. And I think it's awesome how music is more accessible to sort of soundtrack your life. But then I think you sort of start to take it for granted, and maybe it's due to some of the quality of music coming out these days, or you struggle to find new music to listen to. But yeah, just having like less of those like real moments where it's just you and the music and just the rest of the world fades away. And I actually had a couple of those moments this year where, yeah, like even just one of them was like 2 weeks ago. I was just sort of just laying on my bed listening to Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd after I heard, like that's an iconic song. That's, so many people have that as the greatest guitar solo of all time, but also just like one of the greatest compositions of all time. But I was just fresh off listening to Rick Beato interview David Gilmour, and David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, like he was the sort of main composer. He just doesn't do many interviews, and Rick Beato as well is, you can't really call him a music journalist. I mean, he's just not a music journalist. His main career was, he was in bands, and then he was a record producer, and then he sort of retired from producing records, and now he's just like a YouTuber. He started to build his YouTube channel, and he just does the best fucking interviews. And so many musicians who don't want to talk to anyone will sit down and do an interview with Rick Beato because it is just about the music, and he's always such a fan of their music and just asks so many great questions about the music rather than just getting into their personal lives or whatever bullshit that your typical music journalists and interviews are usually centered around. So just consuming an hour of that, and just this is turning into a rant. I'll actually wrap this up and give you the rest of my music recommendations in a second, but like something that we're big on here at General Physical Preparation, something that we try to push in a lot of our education is this intersection between art and science. And musicians, like they really inspire me, just the way, because music, again, it's the same as fitness, it's the same as cooking. And there's so many other fields like this that are equal parts art and science, or where we're forced to embrace the objective and the subjective. And especially in the evidence-based, data-driven era of fitness, I feel like it's like the qualitative, subjective side sort of gets lost sometimes. Again, it's there, and we can sort of see it being pushed, like a lot of these biopsychosocial ideas, more complex thinking, and things like that. But yeah, obviously, like musicians and chefs especially are two groups of people that just innately have a feel for this balance between the objective and the subjective. So I was really inspired listening to this David Gilmour interview conducted by Rick Beato. And then just, like I said, like I've listened to a decent amount of Pink Floyd in my life. I believe Comfortably Numb is from the album Brick in the Wall, so it's not off their biggest album, Dark Side of the Moon. But yeah, like I've definitely listened to Comfortably Numb. I've definitely heard the guitar solo before. I've even heard Rick Beato, I think, did a whole 20-minute breakdown of the guitar solo and talked about what he liked so much about it. But I finished listening to the interview, and I just laid down on my bed, put my headphones in, and I played Comfortably Numb from start to finish, just sort of laying there with my eyes closed. And yeah, just, I don't know how to describe it. It was like, yeah, it was just a transcendental moment with the music. And again, like just leading through all the verses and choruses of that song. And like there's a bit of a guitar solo in the middle, which is like fucking phenomenal, really melodic. But then, man, the guitar solo at the end, guitar solos are such a lost art as well. Like you just don't really hear them in commercial music anymore. And like rock and roll, it's turning into a little bit of a dead genre. So yeah, just to hear a guitar solo like that, it was just like, it's just so fucking musical. Like going and listening to that, David Gilmour is not known as a shred lord, and like he definitely shreds in that. But there's so many people who can play faster and jam more notes into that guy. But saying that people, even the shredders, they always talk about this, like how do you make the best guitar solos? And it's like, you know, it should sound to an extent like the guitar is singing. And that guitar solo is literally the perfect intersection between shredding and singing on a guitar. And that's it, right? Like, you know, talking about objectively, there's like people who can play faster, and there's people that know the theory or the science of music deeper than David Gilmour. But then again, there's just this subjective component to it. But then again, like David Gilmour, he's not technically shit. Objectively, he's technically pretty good, and he's definitely aware of enough of the quote unquote rules of music. The same way, again, you need to have a decent awareness of the scientific principles of fitness. But again, it's not just that writes good programs, because a human has to do it the same way as a human has to consume your music. And it's deeper than that. I should mostly keep this about the work of Pink Floyd and David Gilmour. But yeah, if you're not supremely aware of that track, or like if you haven't spent a decent amount of time listening to Comfortably Numb, just throw it on for me and just make sure you're not distracted
back to the
something else, and just let that song fucking wash over you. But then yeah, one other moment I had like that this year was also just, I've never listened to John Mayer. Like again, I've heard a lot of John Mayer tracks just on the radio and just from living life. Like he's a really prolific and popular artist. And I've always respected him as a solid musician who was like, you know, commercially successful, but John Mayer just has a reputation even amongst more hardcore musicians. Like, the hardcore music crowd is sort of pretty split on their opinions of John Mayer, but I think everyone, again, acknowledges the technical brilliance. But I've never listened to, and I actually hit up our podcast producer, and I was just like, all right, I'm getting back into playing music a little bit more myself, obviously consuming a lot of Rick Beato content, stuff like that. And again, maybe it was a Rick Beato breakdown of Rick Beato being a big influence on the music I've consumed this year. And also affecting the way I think about music. But I think, yeah, he broke down a John Mayer song. And then I sort of hit up Harvey because I realized that John Mayer, not only has he produced a decent amount of albums by this stage in his career, but he's also sort of known for each album is sort of, in its own sort of subgenre of John Mayer. He sort of, comes up with a concept or a sound. And then sort of regardless of how successful it is or how much his audience likes it, he will just go to a completely different sound almost for the next album. So yeah, I really respect that about John Mayer. But again, I just wanted one album to go just start to finish on. And Harvey said, like, if you're just going to do one album of John Mayer, it's got to be Continuum. So I throw on Continuum, and yeah, it's an album. It's very much an album. It's not just a collection of songs, but what's the single? Is it Dancing in a Burning? Oh, that's it. Yeah. Slow Dancing in a Burning Room. Like, obviously it's such a popular track and it was familiar, but again, I had a moment with it where, again, I was consuming the music how you meant to consume it. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't multitasking or anything like that. Again, I was just sort of laying in bed, headphones in, eyes closed. And yeah, it's such an insane song. And again, there's a guitar solo in that, it's nothing uncomfortably numb in terms of how epic it is. But again, pretty respectable for John Mayer to get a song with a guitar solo in it on mainstream radio. I don't know when that album came out. I think it was like before 2010, but still, even in that era, sort of like guitar solos were pretty much done by them. Also the guitar solo is not even the highlight of that song. I don't know what it is, because it's not even like the music that I typically listen to. I mean, I'll listen to pretty much anything, but yeah, it's just a fucking good song. So that was a song that had a huge effect on me. I mean, go listen to Continuum, but Slow Dancing in a Burning Room is just, yeah, it's such a fucking good track. I mean, maybe people are sick of that song by now. I know it is a pretty popular song that, yeah, maybe everyone's rolling their eyes at this point, but yeah, it had an effect on me. Maybe it was just right place, right time, in the right frame of mind. And then the third artist or band, I was listening to Fergus Crawley's appearance on the Coach 'Em Up podcast. Shout out to Tim Riley, friend of the show. And they were sort of bonding over listening to Slipknot while training legs. And the track that came up between them as their favorite Slipknot track was Wait and Bleed. Again, I've always sort of been aware of Slipknot, but I think because they had a bit of a hipster attitude towards them because they were quite commercially successful. Again, I'm not a big consumer of like hardcore metal music or anything like that, but like, I listen to a decent amount of it. But again, this is going to seem weird because it's like, I'll still smash Parkway Drive. Oh, they're nowhere near as popular as Slipknot, but obviously they're Aussie and they're just fucking sick. But more consuming bands like Every Time I Die. You know what it was as well about Slipknot? I think the mask thing kind of wigged me out a little bit. I just never gave them enough of a listening to. But yeah, anyway, sort of hearing Tim Riley and Fergus Crawley being G'd up about that song, Wait and Bleed, I threw that on. I was like, fuck, this is a track. But just back to just talking about like music, I feel like a lot of people, especially if you don't listen to much hardcore music, the sort of stereotype is like, that shit, it's just bashing and screaming. It's not real music. But Slipknot, again, there's a reason they're so commercially successful and that their music charts, despite the fact that it's this really niche genre or quite hectic sounding music to a lot of people. But again, it's just undeniably, like, they can just write a hook. So many hardcore bands can't write a fucking hook or like something that's genuinely catchy, but Slipknot, like, not even just like the vocal melodies in the chorus and things like that, but just the amount of fucking riffs that the rhythm section churns out, it's fucking absurd. So like, there's just so many hooks in it for like hardcore metal music. It's just fucking, yeah, I was really sleeping on it. So yeah, if you haven't given Slipknot a chance, or if, like I said, if you're someone who's hesitant about hardcore or metal as a genre, give Slipknot a chance, because that'll sort of meet you where you're at in terms of like, there's still plenty of hooks. It's super musical. It's like quite poppy in its own way. It's just packaged a little bit differently. But yeah, Corey Taylor and I mean, I know they've had lineup changes, but again, they've had so many good drummers. Is it Joey Jordison is the legendary drummer, but I know they got Eloy Casagrande playing drums for him now. In my opinion, Eloy Casagrande is the best drummer in the world at the moment. Yeah, I'm a bit of a drum noob. Maybe actual drummers will disagree with that, but yeah, Jim Root. I don't actually know who's playing bass for him at the moment, but yeah, crazy band. And that's why it's weird how much I even still know about Slipknot, and yeah, hadn't even given them a proper listen up until this year. So shout out to Fergus Crawley, shout out to Tim Riley. And I think the album, if I was going to steer you towards an album, listen to Iowa. But again, they've got plenty of good albums, Slipknot. So, or maybe just go the old Spotify radio. Anyway, let's get into talking about my 2024. Oh, geez. God, it was a long year. Like, year flew by, but I mean, there are a lot of phases to it. I guess because I was in a relationship for half of it. And then that sort of ended in the middle of the year. And that obviously affected work and life a lot. God, how do I even get into this? Well, I don't even really want to talk about the breakup. Well, I do want to talk about aspects of it because, yeah, it was really intense. Like, obviously, I was in a relationship living in Australia with someone that I met overseas. And I think that's just what I want to share about that. Like, it would have been going through that breakup would have been a lot more simpler with an Australian person. Not someone who's from the other side of the planet, but yeah, I guess, and like even just being in a relationship with someone from the other side of the planet, like, you know, this went on for like 2 years. I think I underestimated how much stress that was sort of always causing in the back of my mind. It's not like whatever, like, you know, if it worked out, it would have been, I guess, just saying that I was willing to deal with. But I just, yeah, I think it's something that I underestimated and sort of just one of the things I'm excited for in my next relationship is, you know, probably that it will just likely be with someone who's at least from this country. And it's just when you break up, it's a bit simpler or not to not break up because it's even about like, I don't know, everything's just so much higher stakes in a situation like that. And it just adds so much pressure to it. But definitely more mature for have gone through that experience. And if you want to learn more about the general physical preparation training philosophy, we put together an extremely practical course covering all the different aspects of physical preparation, as well as a unit on programming, so you know how to tie it all together and produce the same world-class results that we get with our athletes. We've got pre-recorded lectures, a community page where you can ask questions and interact with the other GPP coaches, as well as monthly calls where you can ask questions live or just catch up and hang out with us. Check out the link in the show notes for more info. I guess that's the best way to sum it up. Just that any relationship where you're from two different countries and it requires someone, you know, if you're going to be together for an extended period of time, obviously you can, you know, go to a third country together, but it's usually just simpler. And again, especially at the start of the relationship, it was mostly me going over to the UK for us to spend time together. And, you know, it doesn't really affect my work much wherever I am in the world. My income's not affected. So, and that was something that facilitated the relationship early on. But then obviously when they moved to Australia, I got like a 1-year visa. Like it just forces you both to commit to the relationship so much earlier. It doesn't force you to, but again, if you want to spend a lot of time together, it forces you to really dive in. And then the other sort of side of that as well is like it's commitment in and out in that sense, because, you know, in a typical relationship where you both sort of from that area or a lot closer by, you're not fully removed from your support network and your friends and potentially work opportunities. So when the relationship has its ups and downs, you can just be more patient with it. But then even when you've got the time constraints of not just life itself, but then also visas, one of you not being around your support network and potentially like career implications and financial implications and all those sorts of things. Then when the relationship has its ups and downs, again, you're just forced to face this. It's like, oh my God, like if this isn't going to work out, like, yeah, it just feels way more serious. So that was really affecting me a lot through the first half of the year. I mean, like, because yeah, she moved out here like October last year, but it wasn't until, so we stayed at my parents' place for a couple of months until we sort of found a place. The rental market was just fucked down here. We got our own place in January. But yeah, just that whole first half of the year, just business wise, I didn't feel like I was in defense mode, but I was having trouble showing up and doing anything extra. I mean, there's just certain duties that I have to keep the wheels of this business turning over. And I know I can do that no matter what my mental health is like. But for me to be creative and for me to really grow the business, whether that's through making, really good, engaging, valuable content, or whether it's like restructuring the business and our offering, because that was definitely something that we probably needed to do from the start of this year, but it became very apparent. Like my following sort of exploded and nearly doubled in size about like midway through the year. So yeah, it was just really, really hard to do anything extra. And that is just what's required. If I'm going to, accomplish what I want to do with this whole thing, I need to do more than just the necessities every single day to keep the wheels turning over. So just being back, like single Angus, living by myself, having a 2-bedroom apartment by the beach. It's just it's the ultimate work environment. It's not the ultimate work environment really, because the ultimate work environment is when I'm in the same room as Matt and Jacob. Like that's when the business really kicks into overdrive. And that's what I sort of learned when it took me and Jacob on our first GPP business work trip to Bali this year. Like we just got so much done and we're both so inspired and so creative when we're in the same room together. But yeah, just for me personally, when you work from home and your relationships going to shit, it's just it's rough and it affects everything. But then so obviously that wasn't the only thing going on in my life. Like one of my big goals for this year, like personally or athletically, I wanted to the first athletic goal I had was to prioritize surfing, because I had created a business that allowed me to travel so much, but I just feel like 2 straight years just with so much work travel. And I just had a few moments, especially just when I was watching the surf just pump at home, when I was on the road somewhere completely landlocked, just thousands of miles, hundreds of miles away from the ocean. I had a few moments I was just like, why am I doing this? Not like, because I know why I do all the travel for work, because it's amazing. I get to connect with people and it's immensely satisfying. But then I was just like, why is it this, like, doing so much of it and missing out on opportunities to just travel, do my own work, but then surf as well. So this year I sort of put a ban on international work travel, and I wanted to try to squeeze in 4 international surf trips. I ended up squeezing in 3. I could have done a 4th if I really wanted to, but I was like, 3 trips to Bali is kind of cheating. Whatever, it's still 4 international surf trips. And I did go to 2 distinctly different parts of Bali and distinctly different types of surf seasons. But anyway, so the goal was to prioritize traveling and surfing more. And I definitely did an amazing job of that. But then I also wanted to run a sub 1200 meters. And so I finished my first solo track season, I guess the 2023-2024, because it goes over Aussie summer, our track season. I finished with a 12,600 meters, and I really thought if I had a good off season, and that was again like 2 meets, figuring out how to use blocks in the first meet. Second meet, I just wasn't in as good of a shape, I thought, but still, again, managed to produce 2 12.6s, and I thought to myself that I'd be capable of running sub 12 in the 100 meters with a decent off season. And so at the start of the year, I was in a pretty good routine, especially once we got settled in our new place, from especially March through to June, was consistently going down the track once a week, was on grass once a week, doing some form of acceleration session, and had good training partners. Shout out to Joey Zingini, Sam Tolman. And yeah, I just thought I was really, really on track to, definitely got fucked up by the skills gates, giving me some dodgy 10-meter fly times, but I can't help but feel that I was making good progress. But then when the breakup hit, I went surfing for like 2.5 weeks in Raglan, New Zealand, which was a phenomenal surf trip. But yeah, we're in this tiny town, and not only were there no gyms there, we were just surfing is a very energy intensive sport. And I was just surfing about 6 hours a day, having the time of my life, like absolutely no complaints, but that sort of was, disrupted the momentum of my nice track off season. And then I came home for like a month and then went straight to Bali for 2 weeks on another surf business trip. So the first, I'd been to Bali also in January this year for a surf trip in the wet season. So we surfed Karamas, which is like a really iconic right-hand reef break. But then going back in August to Bali, I was on the Bukit Peninsula in the dry season, whereas on the Bukit Peninsula, you've just got like, there's like 20 waves on the Bukit Peninsula, but in particular, there's this little strip where there's 5 of the best left-handers on the fucking planet just within this like 2-mile strip. And I was just staying right on it. And it was, again, it was amazing for the ticking the surfing goals. But the thing about Bali, obviously, not only you surfing twice a day, but the water's pretty bad. Not the ocean water, but the tap water. So you got to watch that. And I must have got some in my tummy because I was shitting and throwing up everywhere. So came back from that trip about 6 kilos lighter. That's the second time. First time I went to Bali this year, the exact same thing happened to me. But that was sort of middle of the track season. But yeah, so sort of just with that whole period, just in the middle towards the tail end of the off season, just doing so much surfing and too much shitting and just going through the breakup and just generally not being as consistent with training. And then from a work perspective as well, just completely rebuilding out the back end of my business. And then that sort of took over my focus because I was like, I have a bit of an all or nothing mentality sometimes. And I was just sort of looking at my track off season. I was like, I've kind of shagged this. And I really need to redevelop the back end of my business. I felt like I had an idea of what the ideal offering was in terms of this, again, this GPP level 1, having the group programming, offering one-to-one coaching, and a few other things and stuff like that. Again, we've built the majority of that out, but it was just a process. Just because I really went to war with GPP level 1. I enjoy making the curriculum for it, but it was intense because like the whole goal with GPP level 1, like we had the mentorship, which was like live delivery and stuff, but it wasn't introductory level concepts, and it also wasn't that GPP. It was very like a big focus on human movement, big focus on programming, big focus on philosophy principles, a little bit of a focus on just business and product design as well. But this GPP level 1 is really just the fundamentals of our training model. And what I wanted it to be was just, like I said, just an actual representation of what we think general physical preparation is and how strength and conditioning should be done. But I just wanted it to be like bulletproof. And part of the process of just like being sure about things is just asking yourself why. And more so than that, so I've noticed this trend with continuing ed where people kind of sell it off the back of how many hours of content. And like, even I've done that. But again, you'll notice like GPP level 1, it's like 5.5 hours of pre-recorded content. But what we set out to do was to also not just have like unnecessary bullshit in there, because I was like, there's only so much stuff that's like really, really good. And don't get me wrong, like you could bore out those concepts a little bit more, but yeah, I'll just say it. Like I've seen someone put out like a fucking 20-hour course on delayed knee extension. And I was just like, man, how many fucking training decisions is this impacting? And like, how much is this course really going to improve trainers' outcomes? There's so many courses where even courses that are on just like training as a whole. And it's like, 30, 40 hours of content. I'm like, how much of this are people actually absorbing? So I just wanted to make the most pure, just fucking fire, just like bare minimum, but still fucking explain everything in enough detail that I wanted it, how I said it to Jacob when we're sitting there planning out the curriculum, I was like, per minute of consumption of this pre-recorded content, I want it to have the biggest impact imaginable on decision-making processes and actual outcomes relative to any other course. And I think we fucking did that. And I think that was the thing as well. I was sort of worried about pitching it as a level 1 because, again, it is like the fundamentals of the GPP system. But then I also think like we have to fairly acknowledge how ahead of the game we are here at General Physical Preparation when it comes to just like the programming side of things, understanding what a fucking human is, understanding what stress is. Because that's it. Like, yeah, we called it a level 1, but I swear to God, that programming section especially would red pill the fuck out of so many coaches who you think are legends who've been in the game for 20 years. Like, it is even just so many of the coaches that I look up to and still respect a lot. Just when I hear a lot of people talk about programming, I'm like, man, so many people just fucking got this whole thing completely ass backwards. And it's such an important part of what we do as coaches. Like, how do you put it all together, all these methods, all these different exercise modalities to drive outcomes? Or even more clearly than that. I mean, what the fuck is program design? What are we trying to do? What's the central thing? I look at it as the controlled application of stress to a human system with the intention of driving particular outcomes. And I feel like most people have a completely whack understanding of what stress is and how humans respond to it. And a lot of our decision-making processes about then how we apply stress to that system are then subsequently affected. And again, once you understand what stress, again, if that's your view of like what the central problem of programming, the controlled application of stress to drive certain outcomes, you just need to be ultra clear on what your definition of stress is and ultra clear on all the different ways and the nature of how humans respond to stress. And because it's changed a lot, and this is again where I run into a lot of online disagreements with coaches, when I shit on periodization, which, you know, a lot of our traditional ideas on periodization theory emerged off the back of Hans Selye's understanding of stress. And we moved on from that. Like all this shit about general adaptation syndrome, like it's so fucking out of date. This idea that humans are largely homeostatic systems. Again, like this is all like the bullshit on stress that underpins traditional periodization theory. As well, like even just the society it emerged from, traditional periodization theory affected it. Like we don't live in communist USSR, and even they had a certain view of humans. Hans Selye, he wasn't from the USSR, he was from Canada. When even that, in the USSR, they sort of said supercompensation because they didn't want to use the same language as the people in the East. Anyway, all I'm saying is like I've been down the fucking rabbit hole on traditional periodization theory. I accepted it as the truth. But then this whole time, again, having this perspective, my own perspective, I was like, if someone asked me like, what the fuck is programming against the controlled application of stress to humans to drive certain outcomes, then actually going down, not the periodization theory rabbit hole, but the fucking stress and humans rabbit hole, I was like, oh, wait. Like the guys who designed periodization theory added, not at the time, again, Hans Selye's understanding of stress and general adaptation syndrome was the gold standard. But yeah, now it's like, you know, we've moved a little bit beyond that. Humans aren't sitting in homeostasis, interacting with training stress in a fucking vacuum. There's a few more things going on there. That's why, again, we're adopting these broader lenses. We're always talking about just like this biopsychosocial approach to programming, realizing that humans are allostatic systems. Again, I'll sort of get back to my yearly wrap up, but does, I guess, just a little bit of a pitch for GPP level 1. If you want to take the S&C red pill, and particularly the periodization of programming red pill, actually understand what stress and humans are. And just, I asked myself why, so that when you ask me why, but more importantly, when your clients ask you why, you can just explain it to them and be like, this is fucking why. This is why I did what we did. And when you learn my system, what you'll also realize is like sometimes like the reason why we do the things that we do is like just because we had a couple of fucking options and we just picked an option that we felt was suitable. But it also then allows you to adopt a collaborative approach with your clients and understand the bandwidth where you can be flexible and collaborate, and then when you need to be a little bit more firm if you actually want to drive outcomes. But yeah, just having the best of both worlds. So most people, when you're like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? But why is things that way? Like trainers can only handle a few layers of that. And that's what I almost broke myself doing. Like, why is this here? Why is this in the fucking course? I just questioned fucking everything. I stormed through that valley of despair on the Dunning-Kruger curve. So that when your clients ask you, why did I do this? You'll have a clear answer. And then when they ask why again, you'll be able to keep going until your client runs out of whys. And then all of a sudden your client walks out of that session an expert on a modern understanding of stress and humans as complex dynamic systems.
The GPP group program is the best deal in strength and conditioning. For less than $1 a day, you get access to my programming as well as access to me through a group chat where you can reach out, ask questions, or have a form check. You can even get a week for free before you commit to it. Check out the show notes for more info.
Probably took up until like mid-November, I guess, to really start to finalize the GPP curriculum and then start to lay it all down and actually develop the course. And so by that time, again, just through that period, training was really spotty. I was kind of just doing enough training to keep mental health straight so I could sort of get back to work. But I just had been sprinting like once every 2 weeks. And again, mostly focused on work. But then even, you know, we didn't end up getting GPP level 1 out until like the 23rd of December. And then that led to, again, just me working over the whole holiday period, which I didn't mind because I was G'd up about the release of general physical preparation level 1, like worst time of the year to launch something like that, like a couple of weeks after Black Friday, launching the new upskill, heading into the holiday period. But I don't care. Like I was like, you know, the GPP level 1, like we're going to be pushing this for a while. So it's like, let's just get it out and let's just push it. Because I was excited to get it out to the world. And I think like, you know, too many people are just like too business minded about it once their business grows a little bit and like they start trying to run things perfectly from a business perspective. But then I don't identify with that. It's just like, if I've got good information, I want to get into the people's hands as soon as possible. So shout out to everyone who did buy general physical preparation throughout the launch period. Like, yeah, it was as much as I was like, oh, I worked through Christmas. Like, fuck, it was exciting. It was one of the most exciting Christmases I can remember. Watching all that roll in and watching the start of the GPP community grow. But yeah, so now it sort of leaves me in a position where, So yeah, back to the training. So just, once I got GPP level 1 finished, I was like, all right, time to pull my finger out, get back into making a little bit more content and also fucking training properly. Get this, not this track off season, but I was like, all right, we're in season now. Time to start swinging. And what did I do? I blew my back out because I threw myself into just training just a little bit too intensely, just with the lift and weights. And that kind of fucked training for a couple of weeks. Sorry, the first 2 weeks after GPP level 1 came out. And then again, load management, BPS'd my way through blowing my back out a little bit. But then just as that started to come good, I fucked my shoulder benching, which I knew would happen because I was doing extra bench press work. And again, just like hadn't been training much and just like really cranked up, like threw in extra. We're benching 2 times a week, top set back down method in the GPP program. But then I was just doing a 3rd session. And that's what I sort of knew. Like okay, so we've got another goal here. See how I set too many goals. So on top of the running sub 1200, getting back into my surfing and whatever the fuck else, I sort of planned, I wanted to bench 120 kilos before the year was out, I want to bench 120 kilos as soon as possible. And I know the way to get there is just to do a lot of benching, but I knew I was sort of playing this game where I'm like, okay, I need to do as much benching as possible, basically just without pissing off my shoulder or my elbow. Like that would just be the constraint. That sort of seems like the bench press game. And just as I sort of felt myself developing a little bit of like shoulder niggle and stuff, I was like, all right, time to pull back. Like that workout, I'm always experimenting with new exercises to throw into the GPP program. And one of the exercises I wanted to play around with was a max effort overcoming ISO, like those run specific ISOs. So sort of getting into like not flat-footed sort of mid-stance position, but like a heel floating sort of mid-stance position with a bar across my back, pushing up into the safeties or up into pins. But so thinking about like being almost at full extension, like I was probably at like 20, 30 degrees of knee flexion, or maybe even less, 15, 20 degrees of hip flexion, like a bit of plantar flexion going on. So like the amount of force I can produce there is crazy. And yeah, I did something to my rib or my neck. Because the most I've sort of had on my back, like a back squat like about 170 like last couple of weeks, but I probably would have put close to like 400 kilos worth of force into that bar or something, I reckon, or a lot more than 170 kilos anyway. And just immediately after I did it, I could barely move my neck or my shoulder. Anyway, so load managed that for a couple of weeks, just as it started to come good. Went out for a surf, was absolutely ripping. But then on my last wave before I came in, I scorpioned it into a sandbar. So a scorpion is when you sort of face plant so hard that your feet touch the back of your head. And my feet actually touched the back of my head. And I didn't face plant. I kind of hit it on the side of my neck or at the top of my AC joint. All that just got smushed into the sandbar. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I was really hurt. I thought I might have had to drive myself to the hospital. Just immediately as I came up from the wave, I was just clutching my shoulder, kind of making some weird noises. And like I heard a crunch when it hit the sandbar. I was just like, fuck, like I'm scared to move this thing. I just had my arm like almost in that sling position. I was just clutching it. I was like, I don't even want to test this. Anyway, so like a couple of minutes went on. I sort of walk my way in. I'm just walking home. I sort of start to test it out and it just feels absolutely fucked. But I did manage to get some function back to it. And I went into the gym to test it out. And I sort of managed to bench 40 kilos. And there was just every now and then it'd just get one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, my shoulder's going to not come out, but yeah, sharp shooting pain. But like I was just, and again, I was trying to like identify like a certain structure that to like, recreate the pain or something like that. But I was like, fuck, what am I doing? This isn't a typical musculoskeletal injury from training. It's a contact injury. Like I smashed myself into a fucking sandbar. It's just impact. So I was like, all right, I just need to sort of rest this thing in. We're sort of into, the first 3 days, there honestly wasn't much improvement. Like, I think we're 12 days in now and I still can't sleep on my right side, which is really annoying because I'm a big side sleeper. I just flip myself like a steak all night typically. But we do have, I would say we got like 80%. We got 80% of overall function. Maybe on strength, we're still down like 60, 70%. But yeah, it's finally coming good. But so that was just, even getting back into training has been a shit show. Having said that, it's 26th of January and the season's not over. So I don't think the season's over. Oh, it might be close to over. But I think there's still time for me to get our race in before the season ends. And I was like, man, if I could just get any sort of PB, I feel pretty good about the year. And like, as much as I may not have the physical qualities, I think I've become a better sprinter. Like, I think my technique has improved. I'm getting better at blocks. I've got a decent amount of block practice in now. So, man, if I could just get like a 12.4 or a 12.5, and then, like I said, I'll just focus on actually doing a proper off season, being disciplined about it this year. Like, it's okay to go on surf trips and stuff like that, but just going to have to keep sprinting on those surf trips and doing my locomotive plyos and stuff and just drive to a gym, find a gym, get a lift in once a week. Like I can be better about it. I can be more disciplined. So yeah, sorry for being a bit all over the place telling that story of the track off season, but there's a few moving pieces there, but hopefully that sort of explains it. Just bit off a bit more than I could chew this year. A few things popped up that I didn't see coming. So we didn't get to run as consistently as I would have liked. And then, just since I tried to get back on the wagon after the release of GPP, just been some not hectic injuries at all. They've all been very lucky actually. Hopefully just get a bit better luck over the next few weeks and finish the season strong. If I can just get one meet in before this Aussie track season's over, I'll be absolutely stoked. Failing that, I'll just set up a testing day. I'll get my brother to do like a hand times 100 or something like that. And just face reality, see where my 100-meter time is at. Fuck those skill gates. Just a PSA for anyone. Those skills gates are super inaccurate. I'm sort of learning that fucking so many timing gates are pretty useless. The frame rate count, just filming yourself with a decent frame rate and then just counting frames, man, unless you have a state-of-the-art timing system, it just seems to be the gold standard. Other than getting in meets, just going and doing a meet. That's the gold standard if you want to know how fucking quick you are. But yeah, that's not that accessible. And it's just good to have good training data. The skills gates aren't going to give it to you. Ugh. I shouldn't be too dirty at skills. Maybe I was asking too much of fucking $160 gates. I went back to therapy. Actually, no, I went back to therapy for one session. I wrote down a note to talk about therapy because I've talked about my therapy journey on here. I mean, for people who haven't heard that bit of the story, I went to therapy because, I mean, most of my girlfriends throughout my life have told me that I would benefit from therapy, but I'm pretty stubborn. And it wasn't until I gained a lot of Instagram followers in the space of a year, and I had never had any interaction with pro sport, but then like an NBA team slid into my DMs on Instagram and were like, hey, can you do a seminar for all our performance stuff? And I was just like, fuck, like, hell yeah. But like, I was like, what the hell? Like within the space of like a year, went from like, you know, just feeling like I should be getting more respect. I should have a reputation for a trainer who has like good ideas about this stuff. And then just did a bit of shit posting on IG. And then all of a sudden I was like, this is too much respect. It was also like, it was fucking weird. I didn't like it. Like I did like it. Like I said, I liked that it happened, but it was a little bit of like a Wizard of Oz moment. Not because it was very validating because like I was pretty sure that this is how it worked. I don't know. Back in the early part of my career, I got told by coaches who were more senior than me to not focus on content creation if I wanted to be taken seriously. Like, you know, if you want to work with pro athletes or something, it's like, you know, go to an unpaid internship and like, you know, just try to climb the ladder in pro sport. That, you know, they would say things like, oh, do you think all the coaches of these like pro sports teams are just sitting there scrolling Instagram at night? And in my head, I was like, pretty sure they are. Like, I bet they are. So I just shit posted on Instagram and yeah, I was right. Like, NBA teams slid into my DMs being like, hey, can we pay you to educate us? And I was like, right. Like, but I didn't like that it was like that. And this is why people talk shit about the fucking fitness industry, because everyone's just learning off Instagram. And it's like, there's good stuff on Instagram. Like you can learn good stuff on Instagram, but I don't know. Like, I guess social media is fairer than the boys club, and that is pro sport, like all the nepotism involved in getting a job there. But anyway, whatever, it gave me a bit of imposter syndrome. I was like, oh, wow, like these people are taking me seriously now. I was having trouble. I think, you know, just both of those things. I had imposter syndrome, but it was a bit deeper than that. I think a lot of people will relate to this. So I booked myself into therapy. Therapist was like, describe your feelings. And I was like, I feel like I'm really good in some ways and really shit in others. That's, I think, sort of what leads to my imposter syndrome, because you always hear people saying things like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And like, I kind of get that, because I say similar things. Like I say, you know, wherever you go, there you are. But yeah, just when I sort of reflected on different parts of my life, I was like, I feel like I'm brilliant in some ways, but then I'm just such a fucking piece of shit. I just couldn't reconcile that. I was like, so how am I meant to think of myself as a person? Now I know that people are complex, like, and that sort of helps me reconcile that duality of man, so to speak. But yeah, so then unpacking that, like, where does this imposter syndrome come from? And not just imposter syndrome, but just a bit of an insecure person, I guess, like, or insecure about just like certain aspects of myself. And, you know, the classic therapy thing is, let's talk about your early childhood and let's talk about your relationship with your parents. And going through all that, like, helped me make so much sense of things. But, and it was helpful. I mean, it was rough. There was ups and downs, but it was profoundly impactful on understanding myself and just my mental health. And also my work, because again, it's all sort of tied together, and my relationships as well. Sorry, but like work's very important to me. And it's weird because, and I was saying it in therapy, I was like, I have good parents. Like I have such good parents, amazing parents. Like that, and this is hopefully this will be relatable for other people. Like your parents are human, so like I think this is a common relatable journey. When you're a kid, your parents are these like infallible, perfect, all-knowing humans, and then throughout your life, and it's not linear, but like throughout your life, you start to see their flaws as you grow up, as you just start to sort of see reality and humans for what they are. Like, yes, they're your parents, but then they're humans as well. And so that happens to varying degrees throughout your life. And I think it's common for kids to get angry about that, then like realizing that their parents aren't perfect, but then their parents have been like really critical of them. And then maybe your parents are like critical of you in ways that are just like projections of that, like they see parts of themselves in you that are triggering to them. And just like, so realizing all that stuff and obviously, yeah, there was a big focus in therapy, not on what mum and dad did well, but like on what they didn't get so well, like what they weren't perfect about. And like that, again, super helpful and necessary to acknowledge that stuff. But I thought that would heal my relationship with my parents, and it just didn't. Like, and now I understand why it didn't, because like they weren't there in therapy with me. So like from their perspective, you know, then I obviously post therapy just had some pretty intense and just open conversations with my parents and how I felt about them, the feelings that I was feeling. I love my parents, but just sort of just never having an acknowledgement from them. What I wanted, I just wanted them to apologize for what they did to me. But like, it's so hard to, because yeah, my parents are a bit like me. Like this didn't come from nowhere. Like my dad's a bit black and white with how he sees things, and like, and my mom. So basically, it's so hard for me to give my parents the criticism that they needed to hear. Not the criticism. Anyway, sorry, I'm just trying to speak candidly here. Forgive me if I sound like a cunt. It was hard for me to give them the criticism that I felt like they needed without them hearing it like, yous were terrible fucking parents. Look what you did to me. Oh my God, how could you have done this to me? Because yeah, all I wanted was this, like, I know yous love me so much. Like, I know my parents love me unconditionally. And so the shit that I was angry about is I couldn't believe that they never took me to get like diagnosed for ADHD or something like that. But that's because just like at that time, like I was the smart son, and like what mum and dad couldn't, the duality they couldn't handle in their head is that someone could have like a mental condition, but then also like be smart and like kind of successful. And in hindsight, the other reason why mum and dad didn't pick up on me having certain problems potentially is because I have such an amazing brother that I think really helped me cope, especially socially in school and stuff like that. So I think if it wasn't for my brother doing such a good job, then my parents would have been better able to pick up on some of the things that I was struggling with. Therapy was really helpful for me in isolation. And it helped with it delivered on all of the things that I needed, like in isolation, but just not everything. Because again, like one other thing that I needed from therapy is like, just needed help healing the relationship with my parents, particularly my father. Because again, like I just know that my parents love me so much and they did such a good job. But then they did mess up. They weren't perfect. And like I needed this acknowledgement of that because I'm like a really unforgiving person. I'm like, yeah, like whatever, like, you know, you did such a good job of sheltering me and give me food and sacrifice. Man, my parents gave up so much time just driving us to sport and shit like that, and working so hard so that me and Oscar could have all those opportunities and stuff like that. Even to the point where like one of my biggest middle class traumas is, I wonder if anyone will relate to this. Like, you're lucky if you can, but it can affect you negatively. So my mum and dad, I just have so many distinct memories of when I was young that I can just remember clearly, like not even just once, just like, fuck, I almost felt like this was happening on a weekly basis when I was young. Like mum or dad would just be talking to me and they'd be like, you know, you can be anything. Like whatever you want to be, like you can do that. And then they would also say like, you know, I'm telling you this because no one ever told me that I could be anything. I wish people told me to be more ambitious when I was young. But and that's so like, I think that's such an amazing thing to tell a kid. What they didn't say is it's also, it's okay just to exist. I understand why they didn't say, I mean, they're already doing so well just to be like, hey, be ambitious. But then, yeah, I think now I know, and I'm sure my parents also know now as well. It's like, you also need to instill in people that it's just okay to exist, because otherwise people just place all their identity in their achievements, which is like, or just certain things and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's a challenging life if you don't know it's enough just to exist. Like, I think it turns you into a really judgmental person, of others, and then also yourself. And like, I mean, like, yeah, you do need to contribute to society. Well, I don't know. Why do we view people just based on their contribution to society and achievements? In the sense that you should contribute if you're able to, but not everyone's born in the same position to. And anyway, fucking whatever. I was born in a position of privilege. I should probably contribute to society. I should probably make something of myself. And then I think there's truth in that. But then I want to believe, I don't accept it yet. And I do accept it. I just don't think I fully embrace it and embody it yet. Just this idea that, because I want that for other people, like, but then like, why can't I accept that for myself? That just doesn't seem like a very entertaining, like, because where it stems from is just this idea that, well, because again, I don't know if maybe this is me still not getting it. I think it's about like accepting that it's enough to exist. And that doesn't mean complacency. But in my head, I'm like, so much of what people do is just like motivated by insecurity. And like, are all forms of insecurity bad? But I definitely know, like, after going through therapy, it's like, yeah, insecurity just like holds so many people back. But yeah, anyway, so sorry, just to make this useful for everyone else and a little bit less personal. If you're someone who, yeah, has that classic middle class parental trauma where you probably have pretty sick parents, but they weren't perfect. And yeah, you feel like you're wrong, and you go into therapy and you're like, you know, just getting that all out of your system. I don't know. You just need to like think about then how you actually going to approach it with your parents, and even like, so, I mean, where I'm at with it.
We absolutely love doing this show, and one of the most exciting things for us is watching it grow, because it means we can commit more time to it, as well as have access to better guests to bring you even more quality content. One of the most impactful ways you can help us grow the show is by shouting it out, screenshotting this episode, and sharing it on your stories to let people know that you're listening. Don't underestimate how influential you can be on helping us grow this show, and we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, my inability to just communicate to my parents, it's like, yeah, I get that you love me and like you did so good, but like, can we have some acknowledgement of these things? What I realized is that is just me, again, expecting them to be perfect. Like, man, they just did so fucking good. Like, why do they need to apologize for shit? And even further to this, like, I'm an agnostic person, but like, just seeing and understanding the value in religion, like, but then like not identifying with one or finding any particular religious philosophy useful to me, or one that I could like swallow, but like seeing the value in like a higher power, and like seeing the value in like submission. Like, I'll give you a non-religious example. like having a coach or having a boss. And like I'm in this position in life where like I don't have a religion, I don't have a boss. I'm willing to tell my parents to get fucked if I don't agree with them. I have no higher power that I submit to other than myself. And like I'm like, I think you need some of that in your life. And I'm like, fuck, who better to put as my higher power than my parents? I don't mean like fucking giving them, what do you call it? Not emancipation, like whatever, like power of attorney over me or anything like that. But like just this fucking like, because you get all these, this internal feeling that I have, it just leads to like, you know, arguments with my dad over like stupid trivial things and stuff like that because he doesn't agree with my opinion. But I'm like, why can't I just make my parents my higher power? Like fucking, you know, if my dad has an opinion on something that I disagree with, just fucking sit there and nod my head. What's the worst outcome I that can come from that when like my whole goal is to have a better relationship with this guy who's done so much for me? Yeah, like why can't I just fucking get over it? Well, no, it's not about just getting over it. Like I went to therapy for it. But yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know, just like, and that's the theme as well. Like, you know, if I can't forgive my parents, I'll never be able to forgive myself and yada, yada, yada. Like, obviously that's been a big thing that is just going to just help me going forward, just being a bit more of an understanding and a forgiving person. And again, like, oh, sorry, I sort of got off the track of it. Having forgiveness and having understanding for my parents, but yeah, just like they can be my fucking higher power. Because yeah, I don't want to hire a coach. I don't want a boss. I don't want to sign up to a religion, but I want to have a better relationship with both my parents, particularly my dad. I feel like yeah, sorry if mum or dad are listening, but when I was in therapy, so much of it was just about dad. But again, like obviously similar sort of things. Both of them sort of missed the whole fucking undiagnosed thing. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Go to therapy, but don't understand that your parents aren't in the room when all the therapy is happening, and like think about you're still going to need to do the work when it comes to fixing your relationship with them. Obviously, if you actually got abusive family, you don't have to fucking talk to them. But yeah, I have a feeling that there's a lot of people who relate to like what I was talking about, where it's like, no, you actually have like really supportive parents, but then you did genuinely get fucked up by them a little bit. But yeah, it wasn't like, yes, and who cares whose fault it was, but just fucking get over it. But you, like I said, you still need to give yourself some grace. Therapy is that grace, but then, you know, fucking forgive your parents if they weren't genuinely abusive. Man, that got deep. That got too deep. We should do more of the solo episodes so it doesn't have to go that deep. Sign up to GPP Level 1 or go get a free program. I'll talk to you next week.